Are you an avid reader searching for wholesome books? Have you been searching for new and exciting adventures or uplifting biographies? How about escaping in a fictional novel, a wholesome fictional novel that is? Then ChristianWritersBookstore.com is for you.
Good day, everyone. I want to say good morning because I normally do these in the morning, but today it's actually in the evening. But our author is coming to us from the West Coast, and so it's actually more of a afternoon interview. My name is Michael Furlonger, the author of God, the Master of Sin, and Satan the Beautiful, and founder of ChristianWritersBookstore.com. Christian Writers Bookstore is not just like Bible study and devotion, although we have those. It's a lot of action, adventure, thriller, suspense, fiction, children's books. We have something for everyone. So if you want to check that out, the links will be in the description below. Today we're sitting down with Cydnie Trenholm. I keep getting her name wrong, so she'll correct me if I'm wrong. She is the author of a adventure thriller book that I want her to share more on. It is called By My Own Betrayal, a book about a trained assassin named Sadie Black, who is trying to leave the assassination business with the help of the FBI. So I'm going to ask her to share a bit more on that, on how that all works. Furthermore, she is the co-owner and head writer of Moving Mountain Productions. This is a movie studio. So watch out, Hollywood. She's coming for you. But when she's not writing for the company, she can be found performing music, studying God's word, and raising her family. So I'm going to pass over. How are you today, Cydnie?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for asking.
Oh, you're welcome. Sorry, it's been so long since I've done one of these interviews, and I really want to get into discussing your book and the movie business. But I was wondering if, before we kind of get into that, I was wondering if you could just kind of share with me and share with the audience about your faith, your church upbringing, and how that all came together for your project.
Yeah, I was raised in a Christian family, went to church as a kid. So I think I was 5 years old when I accepted Christ. So kind of been on this journey for a while now, which is a wonderful thing to be able to say. I was also able to go to a Christian school, so I had a lot of that study intentionally. All through grade school, I went to Bible college for a year. And so, yeah, I've kind of had a bunch of the very Christian, done a lot in the Christian realm, I guess. So the fact that I've chosen to write about a very different world is kind of an odd thing. But in doing that, though, I don't have a lot of that background to hold to when exploring some of these other worlds that apparently I have a fascination with.
That's awesome, and because I personally love to hear about like growing up in that church family, the nucleus, I guess I should say, the family unit. However, I now have to ask, how do you go from like a good like kind of church goer to, I think I'm going to write about an assassin who. So maybe you could share a bit with me on that.
Yeah, it is a bit of a different world, and a lot of the big reason I got into writing, especially this type of literature, was actually coming out of my little Christian bubble. I, as a teenager, loved reading, and loved reading action, and I also was in line, to go see all the Marvel movies and that sort of thing, right? Where all the action, the adventure, the superheroes, the good versus evil, those type of dynamics. And I started looking for that in Christian literature and was very disappointed when, as a young Christian teen, a lot of the books that are written for us are romances, Western romances to be particular. And you get bonus points if they're prairies, because the odds are that's just what it is. So, so I remember getting fed up with that and just wanting to read something from the Christian perspective that was action-packed. I mean, as a Christian and growing up in a Christian family, I've seen God work in miraculous ways, and I've seen him intercede in our lives and has just the exciting things he's done for us. And I wondered why in the world people didn't write about that and write about the Christian life as this exciting adventure rather than just, oh, you can be a Christian and have a romantic relationship. I wanted more than that. So I had an idea just that idea of what would happen if an assassin became a Christian. Really, like, what would happen? And I entertained this thought for a little bit, and it was bouncing around my head when I kind of got fed up with this whole situation where there wasn't books that I wanted to read. So I looked at the idea, and I'm like, I'm going to write a book about an assassin who becomes a Christian because I need a book that I would like to read. And I'm sure that I'm not the only teenager out there who feels this way. So at 16, I started writing this, and 3 years later, with a bunch of interceptions and all sorts of good stuff that happens when you're trying to finish a longer project like a book, I'm sure you can testify to that. Finally got it finished and had it published, and self-published it. And yeah, so it's kind of my adventure in writing and how I got from reading to having a book about an assassin.
Yeah, there's actually a lot you should mention, especially when I consider where you're from, which is actually semi in the prairies, as far as I know geography very well. But we'll get to that in a bit. But I think my next kind of question is, how do you find there's like a moral kind of Christianese gray area of having such a dark main character as an assassin trying to leave that, trying to first applying your character into that role and then trying to backtrack it into a more familiar Christian role?
Definitely. You have an interesting dynamic. At least I found this an interesting dynamic because you want it to be realistic and you want to be able to dive into this character. Fun facts, I am not an assassin. I've never done that. So I definitely involved a lot of imagining and also boundaries, because I know for myself, I wanted this to be a clean Christian book. I wanted it to be something that would inspire teens, not drag them into the depths. If I was going to drag them into the depths, I wouldn't be writing Christian novels and I'd be pointing them to someone else because there's enough of that out there. So for me, I had some boundaries and things that I was willing to think about and things that I wasn't. So when it came to translating my experience and my world over and kind of trying to depict this dark character, I already went in with some ideas where I'm like, I'm not going to, like, you're not going to find swearing in my book. That's just kind of one of the off things, but even just certain other topics. There's obviously there's going to be some violence in it, but the way it's described, it's not gory. I was very much so. I remember my editor at one point was like, wouldn't there be so much blood right here? Like, isn't that worth mentioning? And I'm like, nope, I'm not going to. I don't want the focus of that scene to be this. Which was, and it was a valid point to consider and even to challenge that thought again, to see the value of how to depict something while not making it disgusting or gory or putting the focus off of what it's supposed to. So one of the ways I did that as well was as this assassin character, Sadie, she is incredibly, what's the word? Well, her world is very black and white. This is one way, this is another way. It's all very logical. It's all very systematic. There's not room for emotion. There's not really room for even intuition, like those types of things. It's very much, this is what works, this is what doesn't. This is what is acceptable in her world, and this is what is not acceptable, which is betrayal. Essentially, there's not a lot in that category. But so going in with that mentality, when she flips and becomes a Christian, I was able to, for at least this book, I'm working on a series with her. So there is a little bit more gray area that'll be coming and I'll be working through. But for this book particularly, it was not enough space to deal with it. So I was very much, I allowed the character to flip a switch and be like, this was the moral code I dealt with before. If I'm going to be following Jesus, that has to sit aside and I have to adopt a new moral code and I have to learn this. And in doing so, for this book, she's allowed to kind of just flip into that. Now like I said, I'm working on a series, so I'm just working on the sequel right now. And she's now wrestling with a lot of these different issues of what she used to be and who she is now. But for book one, it's very A, B, C, not horribly, not too crossing those lines or trying to mesh those lives, because it's just one way or the other.
I think that's really interesting. Like my writing, I've removed a lot of my fantasy books I used to write, because that kind of that gray area, you want it to speak to this audience, but you also kind of feel, I don't know where I stand morally. And you mentioned how you don't want to talk too much about like the this should be very violent, very blood and guts and whatnot. And one, it made me think about the old Western movies that I'd watched with my dad, that it used to be like bang, and then there'd be like just like a red dot, and that was the blood and guts. Whereas nowadays movies have a lot more of it, to say the least. But actually, that leads me into my next question: is you are also the co-owner or co-producer of Moving Mountains Production, which is a movie studio. One of your movies is on Amazon Prime. Do you want to share how that all works? How you got into doing that?
Definitely. So a lot of it was just doing what teenagers do. Similar timeline, as I was reading and finding that I was fed up with the lack of books that I could read. I was also getting involved with some film with some friends in high school. And those friends ended up becoming my husband, actually, and then my sister-in-law. So it's kind of a small world, and crazy how God works a bunch of different lines together and weaves our tapestries differently. So so we were given an opportunity in school to do an assignment that we could either write an essay as a group or shoot a scene from a movie. Anne of Green Gables, to be specific. We could reshoot that or write an essay about it. And well, what teenagers are going to sit and write an essay together, right? We grabbed cameras and we went out and shot a film, and it was a blast. It was cold. I remember, like, we're in Alberta here, so I think it was February. It was cold. Our hands were like frozen to the cameras, and we were in these old-timey costumes that were super thin. We were frozen, but it was a good time. And obviously we enjoyed it enough that we decided we wanted to try doing it again. And our teacher actually saw that we enjoyed doing it and saw that we had something there, I guess, and found different ways for us to try those different things. So we were able to do some assignments through film, or she pushed us to do some competitions even. So as teens, we were able to kind of get our feet wet, and it just kind of grew from there. Now it looks a little different. Not so much doing the competition thing at the moment, but we are we did the video that's on Prime actually was a result of a competition 2-3 years ago. The Ledger on Prime was the result of a competition. That was a 1 week. We had a bunch of people come out, and we had 1 week and 3 elements that we had to incorporate into a film. And from start to finish, we produced the sucker. It's about 10 minutes long. It was a very intense week. It was a blast, though. So yeah, that's a bit about that. Right now, we're not really doing that too intensely. We've been doing some different commercials, trying to branch out a little bit, doing some commercial and corporate work for other businesses around, and just kind of trying to learn our craft in ways that are different and ways that likely we can get paid, if we're going to be honest. It's kind of nice when you can get a paycheck doing what you love.
Yeah, definitely. Doing what you love is always good. I remember when I was in elementary school, I had no money for like Christmas presents, so my friend and I, we made a movie, and my parents called it Shaky Productions, because it was just like kids just shaking the camera and to kind of run around being silly, and nothing has come of that as of yet. So this might be off script a little bit. I gave you the question before, but are you looking for stories? Or are you looking, like, how can people get involved or help your business?
That is an excellent question. Yes, we're looking for stories. Yes. I mean, I didn't mention that in the first chunk there, and I should have, but our end goal is to be producing full feature-length movies. We are a Christian film company, so yeah, with those values, those morals, those ideas that are focused on Christ. I mean, what else are we here for, right? So, and doing it in a way that's not cheesy, because Christian film has a bit of a reputation for being incredibly cheesy. So we want to be able to help kick that stigma and to do that. Granted, that's why we're working now to hone our craft, because that's many years away yet. That involves things like financing, which money is money. It's a little hard to come by right now for most people. So financing, we need connections, talent. If you're if you're involved in the film world, whether it's camera, audio, editing, whatever it is, if you're interested, reach out to us. We're looking for more connections, more contacts that we can be able to pull a team together to do some of these projects in the future. We also are looking for stories and looking for other production companies who would be interested in collaborating, where we can throw some of our resources their way and help build into that Christian film community. So that's really, we are 100% looking for people. And if I didn't mention something specifically, but you've had a thought pop into your head, definitely you can shoot us an email. I don't know if we can put that in the description, or if I can. Yeah. So yeah, or it'll be films.mmp@gmail.com. Just fire that at us. That would be great.
I'm curious, will we be seeing that Sadie and her assassination? Will we be seeing that on the big screen anytime soon?
Well, that's a bit of a tricky one. I would love to see that. At the moment, we have no plans. I have no script. I haven't changed anything over. The biggest debate, I know for my side of it, as also the writer, like a script writer and a novel writer, is they're two very different ways of telling stories. So for Sadie's story in this way, book writing was the best. Her story comes through that way. I like how we're developing it into the series, where you're going to be able to get a lot deeper into her head, because you can't really get into someone's head as much in a movie. So changing it over into a movie is possible. I can see it more of being loosely based rather than trying to base it off of it and then having a bunch of angry readers at me because I didn't keep all of the elements that are in it, because you just can't physically do that in a book, not in a movie. I mean, as much as it'd be super fun too, you can't. So yeah, so I don't know if we'll see Sadie's story per se, but you'll definitely see some action, maybe some assassin, maybe some of those roots coming out in future projects.
Thank you, Cydnie. I'm sorry. I really wish we could talk a bit more, but the Zoom has time on us. But I'm gonna put your link, your production company email, and all of that in the description below if anyone's watching. Cydnie's book is also going to be up on Christian Writers Bookstore, and hopefully we'll get a bunch of her other projects up so you can stay up to date with that as well. Anyway, so thank you, Cydnie, for being a part of this interview, and I hope that you keep me posted with what else is new and coming out, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good day, everyone. Bye now.
Are you an avid reader searching for wholesome books? Have you been searching for new and exciting adventures or uplifting biographies? How about escaping in a fictional novel, a wholesome fictional novel that is? Then ChristianWritersBookstore.com is for you. There is so much to explore on ChristianWritersBookstore.com. It was designed to showcase and support authors and creators alike to get their story out. Stories of encouragement and inspiration. Stories to make you laugh or feel victorious. What can you find at ChristianWritersBookstore.com? Bible studies and devotions, biographies and memoirs, books about Christian living, children's books and comics. There's adventure, fantasy, fiction, thrillers, and suspense, poetry, music, self-help, and educational materials. Meet the authors and hear their stories. Find blogs, vlogs, and YouTube videos, all meant to guide and encourage you. You can find this and much more at ChristianWritersBookstore.com. That's ChristianWritersBookstore.com.